She moved, yeah, she moved. She wanted to be on this side of the table with all the girls except for
Coming in
me.
there. I was like, I am not sitting over.
Suit, no.
Today is the September 24th Planning and Sustainability Commission hearing, meeting. And,
That woke us up.
the agenda tonight is we'll have items of interest from the Commissioners, Director's Report. Then we'll have a consent agenda. The first item is a briefing promoting health through multifamily housing. And then the next item is age-friendly action plan, and hopefully Howard shows up so we can have our technical expert here.
We'll tell him that you said that, right?
Yeah.
We'll pass along that message.
We'll get started with items of interest from commissioners. Anything?
Not at this point.
I would just like to remind people, and Michelle, you can plug your ears for 1 second, that on October 10th at 3 o'clock, we have a work session with City Council on West Hayden Island. And so we'll be sitting down with what City Council to discuss West Hayden Island.
When is that again?
It's actually 2:30? Oh, okay, 2:30 on October 10th at council
Yeah, I have
chambers.
it. Yep. I'll be there.
Andre, what will the format for that be? Just kind of an open discussion? Will there be a staff presentation?
We're talking about meeting with the commission officers on October 2nd to try to come up with an agenda. And we're going to meet with the mayor beforehand to talk about how to do it. I'm thinking that it would be appropriate to have 2 or 3 members, each just do a 2 or 3 minute sort of some perspective. I don't think it's appropriate for all of the members to do an opening because I think that would be too long. I know you all have a lot to say. I'm guessing that they will have questions though. That may end up involving almost all of you at some point during the conversation, I'm assuming.
I'm gonna do that.
So you're all welcome to come. At this point, everyone said that they're actually available. So that's the plan right now. And we'll come up with an agenda in terms of probably looking at the 5 or 6 key issues that we identified before. We've met and briefed all the council members individually so far, so they're up to speed.
And generally, these are just kind of at a square table
Yeah, out in front, yeah.
out in front.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Other items? Oh, yeah, Gary?
Just want to recognize Commissioner Haug for having sent some updates on the construction of the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. Last time I was there more than 10 years ago, the whole thing was a construction site, and now at least one of the chapels is operative. And I just looked up their completion date is 2026 or 2028. So kind of aligns with West Hayden Island. But far more important and beautiful.
Gary, I felt privileged, to get some nice images from
Yeah.
Mike that showed the cathedral. Then I talked to a friend last night who's actually got a video from Mike. so he's distributing imagery everywhere.
Did you not get the video?
I did not get. I don't think I got the video.
Oh, you didn't get the video.
I'll forward it to you.
Second string.
You didn't get the video.
I don't. Susan?
Are you feeling left out now that you didn't get the video either, Andre?
I'm pulling it out now. You'll have it shortly.
I have a couple announcements. One is Southeast Quadrant Plan. So we have been working on the west side, and Kat has graciously been co-chairing that group, we're going to have a stakeholder advisory committee for the southeast side now, and looking for any volunteers from the Planning Sustainability Commission who would like to potentially be on that group. We also are taking applications, and they are available online, the application form, and until October 3rd. So we've been getting the news out there, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of people apply. But if there is someone who has an interest, again, this will be a lot of focus on Central East Side, so industrial issues, the connections between housing and the interface between housing and industrial land, and then the light rail stops along the way. That'll all be a part of the discussion. So Don's looking pretty interested.
Don't nod your head.
Well,
You can let us know.
I just nod by impulse. No, I am interested, so I'll kind of think about
Okay.
it schedule-wise. Can you anticipate how long a process this will be? That's
It
always
will-
my million-dollar question.
Right. It should be about 14 to 16 months.
Okay.
So a relatively short time compared to many other
Fair to- yeah.
processes that have gone on.
Okay.
So
I'll give it some thought.
the west side in total is going to be what, about an 18-month total process?
Okay,
So something like that.
great, because I'm really interested in that geography over there, certainly.
That'd be great.
And how it's changing.
Thanks. The other thing I wanted to mention is that Karen has been serving on the Airport Futures Committee, the continuation of that group, and she thought it might be great to have an update. So if you all agree, perhaps we could do that in October or November on what's going on out of the airport since the plan that was adopted. Do you have any other?
There's a lot going on with the airport, and it would be kind of cool to update the Planning and Sustainability Commission on a lot of things going on in the city of Portland.
Okay.
Love to do it. Just let me know when. so I
Okay,
can be
we can do that.
prepared.
And then last thing is just a little thing to celebrate, which is that Portland was chosen as the second most, not first, unfortunately, but second most energy efficient city in the country.
Wow.
And so we nosed out
Wow.
San Francisco and Seattle, and it was a group called the American Council on Energy Efficient Economy. And they looked at all the major cities in the country, and we came in second. So now, but we now have our to-do list. Boston came in first, so we know what we need to do to
Wow.
knock them out, so.
We
Good
can do
thing.
it.
Great.
Gary, you had something?
I just wanted to make a quick correction to something I said about the Sagrada. I believe I said it was more beautiful and more important than Staten Island, which is not true. It's more beautiful and aesthetically important.
Oh.
And I think there's some commissioners that might need to check their inbox for the video.
Oh, okay. 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 Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other items? Consent agenda, consideration of minutes from 9/10, 2013. Is there a motion?
Move what we approve?
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. The first item tonight is a briefing promoting health through multifamily housing. Leslie Lim? All yours? Push the button.
I'm one of the urban designers upstairs at BPS. And so thanks a lot for being here tonight. We're really excited to present this project that we've been working on for the past year and a half. So the project is called Promoting Health Through Multifamily Housing. And we have our partners here, so let me introduce them. We have Amy Gilroy from Oregon Public Health Institute. We have Christina Palacios from Community Alliance of Tenants. We have Nicole Brown and Casey Jama from Center for Intercultural Organizing, and we have Emily Schelling from Housing Development Center. And so I think we'll just jump right in and go into the background a little bit. There's a project that led up to this particular project, so Amy can talk about that. Sorry.
So good evening, Commissioners. Again, my name is Amy Gilroy, and I'm with Oregon Public Health Institute. And we're a nonprofit advocacy organization dedicated to improving the lives of Oregonians through public policy and effective systems change. We've been working here in the Portland area and I guess in the state for a little over 11 years now. As many of you know, childhood obesity is one of the #1 public health epidemics right now. About 1 in 4 Oregonian children are at risk for becoming overweight or obese in their lifetime. And so some of the work that we do is help to improve the environment where children live, work, and play to reduce that likelihood. So for the past 4 years, we've been working through the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's program called Healthy Kids, Healthy Communities. And we've been working with community partners here in Portland as well as city staff to identify ways that we can make housing healthier and safer, particularly multifamily rental housing in East Portland. Part of the reason we're focused on East Portland is because it's the fastest growing part of the city, but it's also home to about 40% of Portland's kids. So during the first couple of years, we spoke with residents at our partner organizations, mostly affordable housing nonprofit providers. We were working with Hacienda as well as Rose Community Development to find out what residents' health concerns were. And then we were also working with the city on conducting a zoning code scan to determine if there were particular policy barriers that were health preventative in rental housing. And what we found were that residents were most concerned with the on-site safety of them for themselves as well as for their children in terms of appropriate places for them to play and not having adequate enough space. They were also concerned about health promoting amenities such as bicycle, stroller, and scooter storage on site. And they also talked about the lack of connectivity within their own neighborhoods to get their kids to and from school safely. One of the obstacles that we found in the zoning code scan was that some of the incentives that are available for building multifamily housing really are underutilized. And so Leslie's going to talk a little bit more about that in her update as well, so we'll go over a little bit of that. So there were 50 communities that were funded through the Healthy Kids, Healthy Communities program of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We were actually one of 2 that worked on housing issues. And one of the reasons that we chose housing is because that's where health happens where we live. Housing stability is a core social determinant of health. Stable, high quality, and affordable housing has been linked to academic performance among children, reduced student absenteeism, and chronic disease such as asthma. And as many of you know, Multnomah County has a pretty high childhood asthma rate. About 10% of children in Multnomah County experience asthma or are diagnosed with it. So I'm not going to go through each of these bullets here. You can read them for yourselves about the many benefits that healthy housing provides tenants. But basically what I wanted to say is that an integrated approach to design, construction, and layout of multifamily rental housing can have multiple benefits, both to the tenant and the owner over the long term. Some of the strategies that we've been talking about to improve health and safety would be to develop more incentives that defray the cost of installing health-promoting amenities such as the ones I talked about, and adopting some regulations that allow flexibility but establish some healthy housing standards for multifamily rental housing.
So as part of our work, BPS's work in this project, one thing that we did was we did a scan of the zoning code and to find out what sort of conflicts there might be in terms of preventing property owners from developing more healthy developments. And one thing that we learned, one example that we cite is that in the zoning code there's an outdoor space requirement. And so for multifamily apartment complexes, there's an outdoor space requirement for each unit, but there's not an overall one for the larger complex as a whole. And so this can sometimes lead to safety issues in that when kids don't have a place to play, a designated place to play, then we've found that they'll play in parking lots, in and around cars, around dumpsters. And from a property management perspective, there's also, there's also damage is a possibility too, in that kids will play indoors and maybe roughhouse and cause damage in indoor properties. So that's a bit of an issue. So, push that again. So what, in the work that we did, we realized that in order to really examine this issue further and really understanding what's happening citywide, we needed to look at private market rentals. And so we thought that that most of the housing out there is really private market housing as opposed to affordable housing, so we really needed to understand that better. And so we looked at East Portland, partly because there's just a lot of momentum happening there, and also because as you look here on this slide, all that purple, the light purple and the dark purple that's there, that's all the multifamily housing that currently exists here in East Portland. So that's a lot of housing. One thing we really want to point out, though, is that affordable housing developers receive funds oftentimes that really are directed toward health amenities and building healthy developments, and they're really affordable housing developers are really mission driven. And private housing developers, they don't oftentimes have access to the funds, or they don't know about them, and they don't, it's not on their, health is not their foremost concern necessarily. So we really thought that we needed to study this further to understand it. And so what we did then was we applied for a grant through the Kaiser Permanente Community Fund here in town. And we really wanted to look at this from the resident perspective to find out what's really happening. And so we wrote the grant, and we're really lucky to get it. And we worked with Community Alliance of Tenants and Center for Intercultural Organizing to really craft a way for them to organize and engage tenants. And so the strategy that we used was really to identify 6 different apartment complexes and find out from residents and surface issues that were important to them in terms of why they might not be exercising as much or eating as well as they could be possibly, and find out from them what issues concern them the most. And then the intent was to take that information and then go to some landlords and developers and find out from their perspective what they would want to do to sort of ease this, to help this problem. And so the Housing Development Center convened a landlord and developer manager committee to discuss this, and ultimately produced a best practices handbook. And Emily will go into that a little bit later. So for now, we'll just jump right in and have Christina talk a little bit about Kat's role.
Hello, my name is Christina Palacios, and I've been the community organizer for the Community Alliance of Tenants for 6 years now. I work with a lot of tenants that live in substandard housing, and the Community Alliance of Tenants is an organization that is a tenant-based organization. Our mission is to educate and empower tenants to demand safe and affordable housing. We were formed in 1996, when we're a membership-based organization. We have about 2,000 members, and anyone that is a tenant or is experiencing lack of housing can become a member. Tenants identified 3 issues as primary concerns when they reach to us. The lack of affordable housing is always an issue. Lack of eviction protections, and difficulty in gaining repairs. Our role on this project was to identify and engage renters in East Portland that were living in private market complexes. We identified those buildings through the Renters' Rights Hotline. Portland has the 2nd lowest vacancy rate in the nation. Less than 3% are private market. The private market fills in the affordable housing need that is not there through affordable housing. So what we gained from this project was directly identify the challenges that renters were having, a venue to provide renter input and to their physical space, and a city-driven process that allowed CAT and CIO to design an engagement format. time for leadership developments for residents that wanted to get civic engagement. So this was a great opportunity for renters to start doing some civic engagement. And on the picture, what you see is our volunteers and CAD members that help us to educate tenants by going door to door and letting tenants know about their rights and responsibilities. Many of the tenants that we visit, they have mice, mold, or pests, and a lot of times that is because the proximity of their buildings. They're like very close to each other, so usually cockroaches can crawl from one place to another. Most of the affordable rental homes for low-income tenants, like I said, they are apartment complexes. And when the landlords are not responding to tenants, tenants get together and it's safer for them, and they feel it's more effective when they work together than if they are working alone. And there's one of the pictures that we took. We have many of pictures like that that we saw in East Portland. Those are the conditions that the tenants live. Hotline consults over 2,500 calls from renters in Portland who have questions about their rights and responsibilities. 30% of all the calls are from renters having difficulties getting repairs made to their apartments. Most of the repair issues people tell us on the hotline are about mold and sanitation and pests. In this project, we door knock and reach out to 7 buildings and engage over 125 households to work with us. So what renters learn when they work with the Community Alliance of Tenants, they learn to address and prevent lead hazards like mold. We teach them what their responsibilities are and what the landlord's responsibility is so they can work together and have a healthy home. If we teach them this process by always making sure they put things in writing, because sometimes it's very difficult for tenants to prove that they needed a repairs if they don't have something to prove. So we always encourage them to put things in writing, and we created bilingual letters for tenants to use, and English too, so they can easy up the writing process. So after tenants learn their rights and responsibilities, we have a tenants meeting where they prioritize the things that they want to work on. Tenants also learn about local policies and system, what is things that they can access from the city, how they can benefit from different programs, and that way they start engaging into civic activities. Typical for CAD tenants, this is the first time that those low-income tenants have the opportunity to sometimes go to a city hall and talk to their representatives. At this project, after we organized and they got some repairs needs met, the tenants identify as prioritizing having community gardens. We encountered many tenants that came from other countries and didn't have accessibility to the foods that they like. So they were either no stores around them that they could go to, or transportation was difficult for them to get to a place where they could buy stuff that they used for daily cooking. So they said that having a community space where they could plant things was very important, and they after getting that communication with their landlord on repairs, then they were able to think beyond that point and ask the landlord to work with them on having those community gardens. And that's how it turned out after a year of work. You could see very many places on those apartment complexes where they had land that it was unusable, or they just had decorative plants. But after they worked with us, they were able to start planting tomatoes and all the other vegetables that they usually grow. And that's it.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Casey Chama. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Intercultural Organizing. Thank you for having us. But I think, first of all, I want to say Center for Intercultural Organizing, as you can see our mission, our name says we are intercultural organizing. We don't work any ethnic specific group. Our mission is building multiracial, multi-ethnic movement for immigrant refugee rights, and our members, we're a membership-based organization also. So our members are from 70 different countries around the world, including the United States. So we came with this project with that kind of a framework, and one of the values that Center for Intercultural Organizing holds dearly is that we believe any issue that our organization engages that people, the community members that we are working with, people who are affected by that issue must be taking a leadership role in solving those issues. So that's kind of a mission statement that we come with this project, and we were grateful to work with this project with the other partners. I think this has been one of the most valuable projects that I have been involved since CIO been around 10 years. And one thing that really make very different this project is that we had a multifaceted, agencies who each and every one of them brought their own expertise to the table. So, for example, CIO as an organizing organization, we brought to the table after CAD provide the door-to-door knocking and building inspecting buildings and helping the tenants to address some of the repair issues that they need. Then CIO came along with CAD and started helping folks to analyze what issues are they facing, what are their housing needs, what challenges are they facing, and how do they can be a partner on and engaging solving those issues. So that's kind of a level of work that this group has done. Can you next, please? I think one of the things is that in terms of this also we learn, and I think this is something that CIO has been also deeply believes is that I think the value that we brought this project is that project approach is very, very difficult. And I know that this is kind of a ways that a lot of times our communities organize around. We organize around our projects. So we do one project engage, and then we finish that project and we leave. One of the first meetings that we had with the community, the first question that they asked us was that, are you one of those agencies? That's really literally what they told us. You come, you present your project, you accomplish what you're supposed to do, and you fold it, and you leave us without. And that's really, I mean, it really took us back. And we said, listen, we are here for the long haul. We're not going to abandon you. And that's kind of a level of the experience that the community has, but particularly since these folks are mainly, all of them are refugee population. And, you know, being abandoned, it's really issue for them because that's the lifelong experience that they had been abandoned by others. And as a former refugee myself, I related to that. So when I look at them and they say, no, we're going to stay here for the long run. So I think that's kind of a lesson learned for us, is stay in this community rather than asking the hard and difficult question is what's going to happen after we accomplish the tasks and the goals and the activity that we set for ourselves. So now I'm going to move to Nicole, who's going to talk about the rest of the presentation.
Well, I think that mostly Casey pretty much nailed it on the head about what we learned from this project. As he mentioned, many of the buildings that we door knocked, many of the tenants did not speak. Maybe one tenant out of 30 spoke English in their home. And some tenants, Christina can tell you, sometimes there'd be 5, 6 languages. And that is the reality in the demographic of East Portland. But a lot of their needs, while some of these are, I think, Portland's most vulnerable community members, a lot of the needs and challenges that they face translate across many of the low-income families that live no matter what ethnic background they may be in Portland or if they're U.S. born. But I think that, I guess this last part is just talking about how we are moving forward. As Casey talked about, we are committed to staying with this community as well as Kat. And so, as we finished and accomplished what we were trying to do and the recommendations we were trying to come up for this project, we continue to meet with those community members. There's lots of interpretation needs and other things, but we are just continuing to develop those leaders and show them how the system works so they can continue to promote change. And we also have many of those community leaders we have a Bhutanese organizer who most of the folks that we have encountered and have continued to engage with us are from Burma, and they're ethnically Karen, Burmese, and refugees that speak Nepali that are from Bhutan. And so we have been able to continue to engage with those folks, and we have our pilot, which is our leadership development, a year-long leadership development academy that we actually partner with the City of Portland through Office of Neighborhood Involvement with, and we're happy to say that 4 of our participants out of 20 are going to be out of this project. So, we're just continuing to build the leaders out there and continuing trying to engage the community, even though our community groups don't have the resources to continue to do so. In order to really engage the folks, and as I said, Portland's most vulnerable community members, you really have to be able to committed to continue to work with those folks.
So before I pass Max, I want to just also touch, there was also a youth component in this project. And I think one of the things that we learned from also is that, because we were trying to work with the families collectively, both addressing and working with the youth as well as the adults. So CIO kind of took over in the youth aspect of it, and Nicole and other folks worked it closely with the youth, where the youth also did a photo project where they took a photo of scanning, environmental scanning on their neighborhood and take pictures and kind of then talk about themselves. And we hired a few youths who were as part of the project who were kind of helping to facilitate that discussion. Again, another, we are empowering folks who have been impacted by the issue. So CIA was kind of supporting and facilitating that by helping youth themselves to facilitate that discussion. And then later on presented that as through a fourth voice about their finding in their neighborhood and their families and their housing conditions that they are facing.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Schelling with the Housing Development Center, and I'd like to start by just echoing what you were just saying, Casey, a while ago about just really valuing the opportunity to work on this project. It's been a real honor to have an interdisciplinary group of people working together on something that has the potential to have some significant impact in the community. So I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about the Housing Development Center. We're a nonprofit affordable housing consulting group, and our clients are other nonprofits, community development groups, housing authorities, and government entities. And we're focused on doing comprehensive development services for affordable housing owners, asset management, and we do a lot of program and policy development that helps to promote an equitable and sustainable cooperative affordable housing system. In our 2 decades of work, we've developed about 4,800 units of affordable housing and over 250,000 square feet of community facility space, including Head Start and medical centers. Next, please. So our role on this project was to convene a committee of diverse landlords and property owners, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and present some of the health and housing related challenges that the organizers identified with the residents, and to present these challenges to this committee and to encourage them to come up with creative solutions for how they would solve them from a property management perspective, a design and construction perspective, and working as well as working with residents. So I can see it looks like you have a copy of the Health and Housing Handbook, which was the one of the outcomes of this project. So this handbook contains about 150 solutions to the 6 challenges that I'll get into in just a couple slides. And the solutions range from inexpensive, short-term, sort of easy to implement solutions to longer-term, more visionary solutions that landlords could invest in that would help address some of the resident-identified challenges. And one of the things that we felt was important to include in this handbook, which I should mention is web-based. You can see the URL there, which I would encourage people to check out in all their spare time. But we have included quick explanations for property owners about why these health-related housing challenges have a negative impact on residents and how addressing them could have a positive impact on operations of the property. So it was very important for us to provide some compelling reason in lieu of being able to offer a bunch of cash incentives for owners to effect changes. We wanted to convince them that it was indeed in their best interest to take some of the recommendations that we put together. Next. Yeah, so the Landlord Developer Committee was comprised of property owners, property managers, and developers. We had 7 people participate. And we worked not only there was only one representative from the affordable housing community on this committee. We took recommendations from the Portland Housing Bureau, the Portland Development Commission, and the Planning Bureau about people who might be interested in participating. All the members own and/or manage multifamily rental properties in East Portland, so they were familiar with East Portland. And we had the people who participated on the committees were very busy people, and so I promised them, a series of 5 meetings where our conversations were very structured. And we had some additional phone consultations. And so in addition to this committee, there was a lot of outreach that we all made, I think, to a variety of people to try to get as much input as we could as to what are some potential solutions to the resident-identified challenges. So here they are. These are the 6 challenges that really range from being challenges that the Oregon Public Health Institute had spotted related to some of their past work that promote healthy eating and active living, and some more health and safety concerns that were identified just a few minutes ago. So we really took on the range of challenges that were affecting people's health in their homes. So you have the handbook in front of you, but I want to just kind of spotlight just a couple of the solutions that we devised to address some of these challenges. Open space was a particularly interesting one because space on existing multifamily housing is sort of what it is. But we were encouraging people to take advantage of existing space on their site and make it more usable. So even though a lot of these solutions were geared towards existing multifamily housing, we feel that a lot of them will be very useful when it comes time for new development to occur in East Portland and elsewhere in the city limits. We encourage people to creatively repurpose unneeded parking space. As you know, in East Portland, vehicles are really prioritized, so there was a lot of these properties don't have full parking lots all the time, and there were definitely opportunities to make different use of that space. And we also provided a lot of concrete tips about how to design open spaces that accommodate a variety of age ranges and needs, so spaces that can be flexible. With respect to another example like mold and moisture control, we have a lot of easy to implement tips on providing proper ventilation in apartment units, tips for protecting the building envelope from moisture infiltration, which is an issue that we care about a lot at the Housing Development Center because we need to protect our assets, and water is kind of our greatest enemy if we're looking at durable, sustainable building types. And also a lot of tips around being diligent about routine maintenance to prevent mold and moisture control. Next, please. So that was kind of a taste, but the solutions kind of shake out into 3 categories: management and maintenance practices, resident communication and education tips, and design and construction strategies. So within each health-related housing challenge, we identified solutions that fell into these three categories. Next, please. So I'd like to talk for a second about our work. Most of the focus in the affordable housing community when it comes to the intersection between housing and health is really focused on reducing healthcare costs and bending the cost curve. So we've in the affordable housing industry, we've been very responsive when it comes to health to the policy directions set by Governor Kidsopper that sort of puts health and housing together under the same policy outcome area under his 10-year plan. And our interest in participating in this work has really been to expand our conversation beyond just reducing healthcare costs. There's a lot of research that shows that really improving health outcomes for people is much more than about increasing access to healthcare. It's about addressing the social determinants of health that Amy addressed earlier. So we really wanted to understand from a resident perspective, how can their input help inform our development and asset management work? So I'll say that. Next, please. And here, this is an example of how we think our future work could be impacted. We in addition to convening the committee and working on the handbook, we also oversaw a few architects who provided some design concepts that would help address some of the health-related challenges. And I'd like to point out to you just a few of them. We feel that there are some implications for future work in that there are some design solutions that address multiple challenges at once. For example, the addition of pedestrian paths, and this, by the way, is an existing property that's sort of been rethought. The addition of pedestrian paths that create linkages are very helpful for increasing usable open space and also addressing safety and security issues on site so that people kind of have a strong sense of where they can go on the property, where they belong, and it also helps to segregate private and public space on site. Fencing and benches also creates more usable and safe open space. And there are a number of these solutions which I would encourage you to go through that help to address multiple challenges at once. So, go ahead.
Okay, so this coming Thursday, we have a forum, and we're really trying to reach out again to property owners and developers and managers to really talk about all this work. So we're going to highlight the handbook and look at a lot of the health and housing work that we've done over the past few years and highlight it and really try to engage landlords and talk about what solutions are and how they can be a part of that, basically. So that's this Thursday from 2 to 5. And BPS is really looking forward to continuing this work, and we have the mixed-use code project coming up, and through residential uses, we will examine more of this in our future projects too. So in closing, I just want to say it's really been a huge privilege to work on this project, and I think that we've been really fortunate to that residents allowed us to glimpse into their lives. It's a really kind of an intimate thing, and they've shared a lot with us. And also, it's been a really fulfilling project to work on with all these partners. So I think that I'll close here and see if you all have any questions or comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Questions? Chris is the only. Deep. Oh, okay. Comments too. Go ahead.
So well, first, thank you. This is great work. So I'm curious if you have any other suggestions in the zoning code besides the outdoor space issue, and then I have a question about a specific area. You didn't really touch on it, but overcrowding was one of your bullet points. And my understanding, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the way we define overcrowding in the zoning code is by limiting the number of unrelated adults sharing a dwelling unit as opposed to, say, having a number of square feet per person standard. And I'm curious what you would think an effective definition of overcrowding and how to regulate it would be.
Okay, well, first, I think I'll talk a little bit about the zoning code. So an example that we can give is, we have, in the zoning code, we have some site requirements, such as stormwater, parking, and what else? Stormwater, parking, and outdoor space. And there's some other ones too, but we found that some property owners have had a hard time integrating these on their site. And so, for instance, this slide here that Emily talked about shows some ways of integrating these different pieces, these different requirements. And we found that, this is a way to get more open space, or excuse me, outdoor space, and it's also a way to really just maximize your site so you can have more functions on it. So that's one example. Are there any that you want to talk about?
I would say with, I think some of the issues that have arisen have really been about rehab housing, because as Leslie mentioned, those codes are triggered in a lot of non-conforming use situations, and so developers that or builders that want to do they want to be proactive and they want to install HEAL amenities often have a difficult time doing that because they've got these other codes that are triggered that are costly for them. So some of the conversations that we've been having is around possible substitution or better site integration, as this diagram shows. But I think that will continue to be a challenge, particularly because most of the housing is in rehabilitation housing. So.
I just wanted to speak practically to the issue of overcrowding because I don't understand zoning and I can't offer you any suggestions on that. But what we've seen, and this, granted, we work with immigrant and refugee families, but we also, I think that it translates to any low-income families, particularly with the shortage of affordable housing in Portland and, a huge increase in poverty that we've seen, is that just overcrowding in a practical sense is 8 or 10 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, which you're going to see in East Portland. And so a lot of, as from the community perspective, a lot of the recommendations that we are trying to make, our perspective we're trying to give is, we know that this is not, it's against code, it's against a violation, but people aren't going to throw their family members out into the street, and they're going to live that way no matter what. And which was also a big reason why people weren't reporting repairs or living in really substandard conditions, because they were afraid, knowing that, oh well, I have too many people living in my home. So we were looking at, the effects that it had on kids in school, health, mold issues, pest issues, huge things. And really just also, so some of from the community perspective, the recommendations we were giving is ways to make the property more usable so that people are going to be living under these conditions. I think it's something that people should accept and understand in these low income areas, and saying, okay, well, if, community rooms kept coming up, or other spaces that people can go and be and study, or whatever it is that they need. And so that's just kind of like the perspective of a more practical sense.
And finally, quickly, I think the real solution, though, is we've been looking into the CIO, this issue, for quite a couple of years, few years now. And reality is that our demographic is shifting in this country and this state and this city. We're no longer going to be having a family of 2, husband and wife, and 2 kids, and dog and cat. And the reality is that the size of family of this community is changing, and we need to really address the root cause of this, which basically figure out how do we build a larger units, family units. That's a real solution. I don't know how, but that's what it is.
Okay. So, just to follow up on that, I hope that you will support the City of Portland's efforts to get inclusionary zoning allowed in Salem, because that's obviously one way we can start to work on larger housing units. So hopefully we're all in alignment on that.
Michelle?
I just wanted to share that some other work that's going to be going on in this area generally, and trying to integrate the health concerns with the built environment. One of the other organizations I'm involved with is the Urban Land Institute, which is a national organization focused on smart growth. And in 2014-15, sort of the national agenda is on building healthy communities. And part of what we're going to be looking at locally in terms of program offerings is how do we get this information out to the development community and the property owners and the professionals that serve them. And I've already roped Karen and Gary into helping with brainstorming efforts to figure out
what we want to do in terms of
Love it.
that programming. And for example, the work that you did with architects in terms of coming up with solutions. I think that's the sort of information that we want to gather and then share. I talked to Michelle in BPS about some of the work that's been going on generally. And I know one of the things she mentioned was just in the commercial realm. I think in New York, they found that if you made taking the stairs more entertaining, you significantly increase the number of people that took the stairs. If you add notes or something, so it's a musical experience as you go up the stairs. So it's just sort of broadening what we're thinking about. And I think the private sector is interested in this as well, beyond just sort of the affordable area. It's something that affects all of us.
Gary, Karen?
Really great work. And one of the challenges that I've always found in community health is the question of going to scale. I guess I'll ask a couple of questions. One is, how far are you from going to scale on this? It sounds like this has been a relatively small project and there's still a world to deal with. And is there a plan or is there a social change theory about going to scale? And lastly, what can we as a commission do to assist and promote the work you're doing?
Well, we've been trying to figure out how we could, what would be really helpful to see if we could actually get an implementation project started. So we'll have to look into that more, just to really test what this looks like this example we have here, a future integrating the different site requirements and that sort of thing. So we have to look into that. In terms of how you can support us, I think that we have to really talk to the landlords and developers and property owners out there and really engage in these conversations and really move this conversation forward. I mean, I think from the start of this project, I think that Amy, you talked a lot about smoking and how hard that was to move that issue forward. And this is a similar issue. And so hopefully we can, move it a little faster maybe.
Thank you.
One thing I would add, I think would be interesting to figure out, are there development incentives that would be effective in this area? Because that's something we could influence.
Karen and Kat?
Oh, there was a follow-up.
Yeah,
okay.
thanks. Sorry. This was a follow-up on getting to scale. I want to echo what Leslie said about a demonstration project. I think that would be very valuable, and if we could be disciplined in an approach to studying this in order to demonstrate to private, non-income and rent-restricted landlords that there is a reason for them to do this work. I think that when I first kind of talked to people about this, their attitude, some people had the attitude of, well, if East Portland is lacking in health-related amenities, why is that my problem? How can I solve that on my apartment site? I have 30 units. And so I think that, there's a lot of people in the city who are really invested in promoting positive health outcomes for people, but that's not typically why people get involved in real estate. So, if we could somehow make the case in some other way as part of this demonstration project that Leslie mentioned, that there is some operational gains to creating healthy environments, I think that could be very compelling for people.
Yep. I'm going to go to Karen here. Susan, well, Kat, I can't remember you. Don, you'll go ahead.
Okay, I'm up. Oops, I think that was on. Well, I just want to echo what the other commissioners have said. This has been a great report tonight. And I really, really, really appreciate it in my day job. I'm in East Portland, and that's these are the families I work with, and every single day. I have two questions. So one of them is where were the 6 complexes that you studied, and how were they selected?
So the 6 complexes are in East Portland between 82nd and all the way close to Gresham, where East Portland stops. And they were selected by people called our hotline at the Community Alliance of Tenants, and we identify it that way.
Okay, so the number of calls that came from certain complexes located within a certain geography kind of led you to the fact that, uh-oh, I'm hearing a whole bunch from this one. I'm hearing a whole bunch from that one. And so my question is, like, what school districts are they in? What's the actual geography?
David Douglas. And also the other thing, besides getting a lot of calls from those apartment complexes, once people found out we were there organizing and helping people to gain repairs and have a healthy home, they were telling their neighbors. So we had a lot of recommendations. The community nurses were telling us about apartment complexes and calling themselves, finding out, hey, you guys are helping people. Can you help people that I'm serving? So that's how we start getting more and more calls in the same area, well, in East Portland.
So obviously, we're needing more of this, speaking once again to this scaling up. And so the idea around relationships and empowerment that you talked about, I think is just really important. And then the other idea that you brought up, that you just don't walk in to a project and walk out. So to that end, I would make a suggestion that you can connect the people that you're working with to the East Portland Action Plan Civic Engagement Subcommittee, because that subcommittee is an ongoing subcommittee that is working directly with people with 30 or 40 different languages to be able to stand up for themselves and advocate for themselves. So that's a nice connection in the community, maybe once the projects are, so you can kind of hand off people to a great support group.
We actually have done some of that. I've been working with Eliza from East Portland neighborhood, and she is part of this group, and I've been connecting tenants. The challenges for tenants to get to different locations is lack of driver licenses, no transportation, and no jobs. So my request, as Gary was asking, what can we do? Support the community in the ways that is going to help them to help themselves. Providing them driver licenses, making sure they have a job, making sure they have access to languages, because we found out on this project, and I've been witnesses this for many years organizing tenants, is that there is not language banks available for those residents in many places that they go to. Like the county is very good when they go to see a doctor sometimes, but sometimes, they go to other places like Social Security office, or they just need to access a lawyer, for example.
Right.
They won't have a language bank that they can go to. So the options that those tenants have are very limited. And I think that a way to make sure they are included in different process of the city is to give them the tools that they need to succeed themselves.
Right. That's just one more thing about EPAP is it's all translated into multiple languages. So that's a great way for people to be able to connect. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I will just quickly add to what Christine said. I think in terms of the site selection, one of the also things as a group process, we also come up with our own criteria internally of what the building type of, with the lead of the CAD helping us. So for example, we make sure that we have this in multiple units. Number two, for example, there has to be multi-ethnic aspect of the community that we're serving. So there's a bunch of reasons that we went to specific buildings. Folks has to be getting engaged and willing to partner with us to solve the issues that they are facing. So there's multiple reasons that we selected those processes. But I think also EPAC, I think, is a great organization. I think they're doing great work. But I think ultimately the most important thing is that we have to keep continuously supporting these community members and figuring out ways to scale this project more for future engagement.
I'm going to share this project tomorrow night.
Great. Kat?
So my question goes along the lines of scalability, but in perhaps even a different way, but building form. And so it seems like a lot of the projects you looked at were very similar types of buildings. which is great. And I totally understand how you're kind of focusing and get your arms around kind of one thing to understand. But it seems like one of the next steps, or would be interesting to also know, is how when buildings get taller and you're putting in affordable housing, does that affect the community within it? And so there's been a lot of talk about community isolation in taller or high-rise buildings, and how does that affect healthy living? And a lot of the things that you brought up, I think, is exactly right on for high-rise as well. It's creating community rooms, community space, places for interaction, but are there other things that just haven't been identified that are different due to the type of building? So I don't know if you looked at any of that yet, or if you're thinking about that, but if you're not, I'd certainly challenge, again, as you scale up, to think about that. And then backing way up. This is great work, and so impressed to see that so many of you come together to do this. It's great.
You know, you make a really good point, and I think that we're a little limited in that we were looking at East Portland, where you have 2, maybe 3-story apartment complexes. And so part of the site selection criteria really was trying to find sites all around throughout East Portland in different areas, but also looking at different typologies. So, you know, like some apartment complexes, it might have been like a courtyard sort of typology, whereas there are other ones that were much more like L-shaped, or, you know, so there are different typologies in that sense, but it wasn't very dense because it was in East Portland, and so that's unfortunate. But I think, you know, it would be great to continue this project and look at different, you know, types that are out there and see the health effects.
My comment was more of a one for the commission to think about, that we've spent, some of you, the past, I don't know, 8 years, how long have you been on this group here? And a lot of that time has been way up here at the Portland plan, sort of big picture, kind of comp plan coming down here, you know, West Hayden Island, the West Quadrant, Central East Side, or sort of mid-sized projects. This is kind of a turning point, and it was, in my perspective, one of the reasons we came together as the Planning and Sustainability Commission, was to say that we aren't just about big plans and code and the big picture, that we need to get in the streets if we're going to do the work too. And so this is a really good example, I think, of an area we hadn't focused on. I think if you think about the green building work that's happened over the past 15 years, this is sort of the stage 15 years ago that green building was at, that there was identification of, you know, what are the issues? How do we make change? Who are all the partners? Who needs to come together? And we came up with sort of here's the list of solutions. And then we said, oh, we need to do demonstration projects because no one knows what we're talking about. And so I think it's a really nice model. And a lot of the same players in terms of architects and designers and engineers and, you know, the other folks. We also have this challenge of that we've talked a lot about at the retreat, that 2 of the areas you wanted to focus on, one of them was East Portland, and the other was a recognition that we are growing quickly, and that 80% of the new units that are going to be built in the next 20 years are going to be multifamily in Portland. And so we have this huge opportunity. Not all of that's obviously going to be for lower income households, but some of it will be. And so how do we help do what the things you're talking about? So I'm just really impressed that you all are here, and I was really happy when Leslie started this to join with you all to do this. So I just want to congratulate her as staff in terms of kind of helping bring some of this together and joining with the rest of you. So I don't know what the next step is. I don't know how we help take this to scale, and I know it's not, I'm almost certain it's not the city in the leadership position, but hopefully it's the city in a really good supporting position, and you're telling us what it is that we can help to do on some of this. So, you know, as we do our work plan for the next 3 years, we're going to bring you our new strategic plan. This is one of the things you can say, you know, are you going to do more of this? Or are you going to do more of that? So I just want to kind of lay it out there as an area. And in general, this kind of work has been something the county did. It was seen as a social service. But there is this real connection to urban form and to building codes and to design.
Just a quick jump in there on something you're saying. It's not necessarily the city. think those zoning code carrots at the moment, and and you've talking about it, and you hit at it, Chris, aren't working. As somebody who's doing housing projects throughout, the carrots for producing larger units, and I would say community-driven open space. You're absolutely right. We're getting private unit open space, but maybe not community-driven open space, aren't strong enough to kind of have it economically pay or encourage the development that way. So that's certainly something I guess I would challenge us as a commission to go ahead and push for and strive for and figure out how to maybe tweak to make it work.
Don?
I want to kind of build on some of the comments Susan made. I think this is a turning point project, and thank you for coming tonight and describing your work to us. The key difference for me is that you started with the social considerations of multifamily housing, and then you went to the physical form that addresses those social conditions. And that's real important. A lot of times planners get that the other way around, or they don't consider the social aspects of housing. So I think your foundation is excellent. The other comment I'll make, and the reason I'm very interested in some example projects that might move ahead, is everything in the handbook, and I really enjoyed looking at the handbook, it's good for business too. It's good for business because it improves facilities, and that means tenants are going to stay there longer. These are all really, it improves safety, which decreases an owner's liability. They're all, everything that's in here, these are all smart decisions. They're smart business decisions. And so you shouldn't be kind of apologetic about them at all, but rather proud. And I would really posture these as real practical solutions that can be applied by a number of private developers on their projects. So nice work. Thank you very much.
But you bring up a question, and you were kind of saying it here on the side. What makes me go curious is, so it is good for business, which means you can raise rents probably, because now those apartments are going to be more in demand. So I don't know how that all plays into it, and what incentives we can do and or identify to how do we maintain rents that are affordable, but yet still up the quality of the housing stock.
Yeah.
So I just want to comment on that because there are a lot of amenity bonuses that have a health or are designed to have a health benefit. There's kitchen storage bonuses. There's additional children's play area bonuses. There's long-term storage as well, bonuses for long-term storage. But as people are talking about this, they're not well utilized, and I think, so they're not having the benefit that they're intended to. So, I mean, the question to me is, while a lot of these solutions in the handbook are good solutions, they're best practice solutions that we've examined from other communities, they still are going to have an upfront cost. And to your point, if developers and builders can't recoup that cost in other ways, they could be transferred down to the tenant. And so I really encourage you to take a look at different incentive mechanisms that, either the carrot or the stick approach. I think we do want to be, we do want to be fairly balanced in making sure that property owners have flexibility with what they can do, and builders and what they can do on site. But I think we do have to take a look at that a little bit more because there already are a lot of HEAL bonuses in the code. They're just not being utilized.
And I actually just want to thank you for making that point because something that we thought about as a community organization and community organizers learning about HEAL as a concept was the very first thing that came to our heads. It was like, what is going to keep those people from keep raising rents? And so I guess when we also ask what the commission can do is, I'm sure you've already started to think about that, but continue to really keep that central because, it's something that's happened in Portland historically. And I think that's if these apartments are going to get better, how can our folks continue to live there and not just get pushed out again? So,
doing the organizing work, I recommend about 2 projects to landlords when I help tenants to write letters to them asking for repairs. One of the programs that I recommend is the winterization program and the lead program, where if the landlord gets money to make their home healthier or, better, about 60% of the units that they rent have to be rented to subsidize. So that's one of the options.
I just have a kind of a question, but there is, in thinking about some of these, as we think about kind of our code, we're thinking about density. We're thinking, how do we do apartments without parking? So the option for some of the amenities you're talking about, developers take advantage of by utilizing for actually apartments. So thinking about that, incenting someone not to put in parking, how do we, the discussion to my mind is, well, what's the trade-off if you said no parking, is play areas, open space, is that a trade-off, a reasonable trade-off if they didn't have parking to put as a bonus in place of parking? And I don't need an answer, but that's something that would be interesting to come back through the comp plan and whether or not that would work. The other one is, have you taken this to the Design Commission to talk to them about, I mean, in terms of this book, but really the thoughts around design of new buildings? Because I do think that's in our purview, and that's coming up, and to get some suggestions from them of potentially, as you look at new housing, and multifamily housing specifically, there's a lot of interest in very good design, and healthy good design seems to be a nomenclature we should adopt somehow, and how to do that is really probably need some suggestions of how do we adopt healthy, not even affordable, but just healthy housing, multifamily housing design standards. And I don't know what those are. You certainly have suggestions, but the Design Commission may be able to give you some thoughts there. And the last thing is, it seems to me that's the scale problem, but I think we can help you with scale if we can get some suggestions of how to implement that from that standpoint. And I would just make this comment that it seems that it is good business to me to have healthy housing because it's better employees, it's lower healthcare costs, it's healthier children in your schools, and those are all dropped to a bottom line cost of, the cost of schools, the cost of your employee, the cost of the housing long-term in terms of maintenance and turnover in the housing, and the cost of kids, and if you can have an attentive kid versus a sick kid, that those are all positive things in schools. So there are some benefits. We just need to kind of tease out, how do we quantify those benefits in a code? And that's tough, but I think it's doable. And the incentives we looked at when we did green buildings probably a long time ago, people thought, well, now they're standard. So these may not be standard today, but they may be standards in the future. And I think we have a great opportunity to do something on the east side where we have a lot of housing that could come in the future. So thank you very much for your dedication and all the work you did. And Don's got
I forgot something. I want to sneak in one last comment, because we're starting to talk about incentives and what might make sense in these situations. And I don't know if this is already in the code because I haven't looked. Bedrooms. I think it's really hard to rent a 4-bedroom apartment, probably anywhere on the east side. It's probably hard to even rent a 3-bedroom apartment, but 4-bedroom, and it's, I think, an interesting idea to look at and might orient to a lot of the family structure on the east side, outer east side. We recently completed a multifamily project in a suburban community, which shall remain nameless, and we put in, out of 280 units, we put in 48 4-bedroom units. Wow. They were the first to rent, surprisingly. And it was interesting. It was really appealing to people. And it's kind of a family-friendly move. that the developer made that really kind of made sense business-wise, too. I just mentioned that.
Any other last comments, questions? Thank you very much.
Very much.
Next item on the agenda is Age-Friendly City Action Plan. This is a briefing. Deborah Stein.
No, you're good.
And Catherine, it is cold over here.
It's really cold, yeah.
That's because we're getting old.
By the minute, by the minute.
I don't know who the senior person here is.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, so I'm Deborah Stein with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I'm just going to say a couple words just to introduce this item, and then I'm really pleased to present or to introduce our presenters, Dr. Alan De La Torre and Dr. Margaret Neal from PSU. You've heard from them before. I've had the privilege and the fun of working with them for a couple years now on as part of the Age-Friendly City Advisory Council, and we've been working together on this plan that you're about to hear about, but also talking more broadly about how we can be working together with our partners, in this case, Institute on Aging from PSU, Elders in Action, AARP, Multnomah County, and a number of other partners on our Portland plan, on Comp Plan, and all the other work we're doing to really take into account how we want to be designing our city to be age-friendly. And what I think is most interesting to me is the congruence between the things you'll hear about in this plan and all of the ingredients we talk about as a healthy, connected city. Social gathering places, affordable and accessible housing, convenient services, access and safety. All of those things that we talk about as being part of a healthy, connected city are really what we hear from older adults that they want to see as an age-friendly city. And you may recall back in the Portland Plan days, one of the biggest changes we made to the draft based on what we heard from the public was to add a page that you might recall that says Portland is a place for all generations. And that really captured a lot of this kind of integrated thinking about what we want to see as a healthy, connected city and what that means for older adults and for youth as well. So I think that there's, again, a lot of congruence in these issues. So I'm going to hand it over to Margaret and Alan, and they'll tell you a little bit more about the action plan for an age-friendly Portland.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having us. I'd like to introduce two additional age-friendly Portland Advisory Council members, Doug Adam and Pam Huff. Thank you for being here. What we want to do is, do you want to please move mic from base? Thank you. Just highlight a little bit about our demographic imperative in Portland. The bolding is not showing up so much, but in Portland, like the region, the state, nation, most of the world, we're aging rapidly, particularly in the metro area as opposed to the 65 plus area. The 45 to 59 is the group that is represented here in Portland in larger percentages than it is in the US. Another point to highlight is that according to a recent PSU study, Portland actually attracts empty nester and retirement migrants at levels exceeding our peers in 50 other metropolitan areas. And the authors of that report talk about the need for Portland to continue its push to become age-friendly. And what I'd like to do right now is just stop for a second and say that the report that was just discussed, that project was just discussed, dovetails perfectly with what we're talking about here. Because an age-friendly city is a city that's friendly for people of all ages and abilities. And I was dying to ask them if there were any older adults in their focus groups, but we didn't get to ask questions, so. But I bet there were. So just a little bit of background. Back in the fall of 2006, we were asked by the World Health Organization if we would be willing to conduct research that would be part of its the WHO's Global Age-Friendly Cities project. Portland was one of 33 cities in the world in 22 different countries to participate in that project. We were the only U.S. city. New York joined later. Since 2007, we have been disseminating the findings from that study. We've been building partnerships. We've formed our advisory council. We've been working to influence policy and practice. We were on the mayor's Portland Plan Advisory Group, and Alan contributed to the policy expert group. Is that the name of it?
Yeah, neighborhood centers.
On neighborhood centers. And we've been drafting this action plan that you received a copy of. In spring of 2010, we applied for membership in the brand new WHO Global Network of Age-Friendly Cities, and we were accepted. We were officially accepted in 2011, and so the photo in the middle there is the city council presenting to the city council the official membership certificate. On the left, the photo there is our our final report, summary of findings from that original study. And then the World Health Organization combined all of the findings from the different cities into its book, which is pictured there on the right. And then now we're here in fall presenting our draft action plan. We have an opportunity to lead, to continue to lead here in Portland. We're one of the longest standing cities in the Global Age-Friendly Cities movement. We're only one of only 5 of the original 33 cities that are remaining active, although a number of other cities have jumped on board. We're already viewed as a leader in terms of our urban planning and sustainability. And we've recently been asked by the American Planning Association to join their task force to create an aging policy guide. So that just as an example of our leadership in this area. We know a lot, we have a lot of organized collaborators, and we're willing to work as volunteers, moving the implementation of actions toward age friendliness in our city. An important piece to remember is this idea that we're planning for all ages, people of all ages and all abilities. And we need to move away from either or planning and plan for everyone across that spectrum. In New York City, what's been being done is trying to implement an aging lens when any policy is being examined. Any new development, any redevelopment, any programs, looking at them from an aging lens. And again, from kids to older adults. And some of the cities listed here on the bottom, Atlanta, Chicago, Des Moines, Kansas City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., a lot of other U.S. cities are working in, if not what's called an age-friendly city, certainly livable communities focus, which has an age-friendly, very large component. So in thinking about this issue, age-friendly communities encompass enabling environments, they're inclusive approaches. We follow the same model, social determinants of health is our guide. So we look not just at the physical environment, but also the social environment. Equity is an important set of outcomes that are derived from these kinds of communities. Taking a life course perspective is important. And then intergenerational interdependence is a key element. One of the few natural resources that we have in this world is our aging populations. And we don't take adequate advantage of our aging populations. We don't have social roles, appropriate social roles for older adults. We don't use their skills, their talents. We don't employ them. We don't use them as volunteers to the extent that we should. And it's a loss, and this is a wasted resource that we need to begin to incorporate as we move forward in thinking about planning of all types. And as you were talking with the previous project, there are economic, social, and environmental benefits from these age-friendly planning efforts. So in terms of the rationale for the action plan, it's actually a requirement of membership in the WHO Global Network of Age-Friendly Cities that we first did our baseline assessment of what's age-friendly in Portland, what isn't, what suggestions are there for change, and second, that we develop an action plan for becoming more age-friendly. Involving older adults is a critical component. Nothing without them, or nothing about them without them is the philosophy that's followed. And then we need to monitor progress. And as Deb pointed out, the Portland Plan actually had this page where it said Portland will be a place for all generations. And item 2 focused on developing an age-friendly action plan, along with a number of other steps which have been also incorporated into the action plan. This is a photograph of our July meeting of our Age-Friendly Portland Advisory Council. Up there is a list of organizations that are members of the Advisory Council at this point. AARP Oregon, Blue Manu, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, Commissioner Nick Fish's office, Coalition for a Livable Future, Corporation for National and Community Service, Elders in Action, Institute of Portland Metropolitan Studies, Intel Career Fellowships Program, Metro, Multnomah County Aging Disability Services, Ride Connection, Terwilliger Plaza, Urban League, and the PSU Institute on Aging. And I would just say that the agenda has our name spelled aging as AGEING, which is a lovely British spelling, but that's not how we spell it here. So in the original Age-Friendly Cities project of the World Health Organization, there were 8 domains of focus, and those 8 domains are listed on the left-hand side. As we moved forward with drafting our action plan, we felt that it was important to pull apart 2 of them and create 10 domains. So we pulled apart civic participation and employment so we could have a domain called civic participation and volunteerism, and another domain called employment and the economy. And then the final, of the 8th domain, community support and health services, we felt that there were enough actions that needed to be taken in those arenas to pull those apart. So that's what we did. And that's the only way in which we have deviated from the World Health Organization model. And I'd like to turn it over to Ellen now to just highlight the key action steps in each of those domains.
So Margaret and I talked very briefly before we came up here. We know we're very short on time, so rather than reading through all of this, I just want to quickly hit a point for each of those domains so that we can get your feedback. We really appreciated what you had said to the group before, so we'd like to be able to engage with you. We understand housing, healthy housing included, really is important to making an age-friendly city. There's this component of educating people, the developers, the architects, those in the build side, but also the individuals themselves. So how do we get people to understand what an age-friendly home might look like or an age-friendly community? In regard to transportation, we understand that there's both public transportation and transit options, but also more community-based opportunities that are out there for really understanding how to get people around their issues with liability for cooperative types of transportation options. There's also an educational program and active aging, active transportation that we really want to highlight moving forward. In regard to outdoor spaces and buildings, we support this idea of increased gardens and open spaces. We also understand that age-friendly businesses are very important moving forward, so people can get into places, that they have places to rest, that businesses themselves know how to cater to older individuals as well as people with disabilities. In regard to respect and social inclusion, Margaret hit a bunch of buzzwords earlier, from equity to social sustainability. We understand that there are obligations of the city in regard to Titles 2, 6, everything under the federal guidelines, and that there are core components of aging that need to be addressed within those policies. As far as civic participation and volunteering, we understand that part of the guidelines for planning in the state is public participation, and we want to make sure that we can involve older adults in the most meaningful way possible. And Margaret had said earlier that older adults are the only resource, or one of the few resources, one of the only growing resources that we have as far as natural resources. So just moving on quickly to the employment and the economy. We have in our research found that there is ageism that exists in employment here in Portland, not only for people 65 and older, but for their children as well, so people 40 and over. We understand as well that age-friendly could be a part of a of a larger push to bring visitors into our place. This could be a way of bolstering tourism. And as Margaret mentioned earlier, this idea of attracting and retaining highly educated older adults is a really important part of economic development. We're already doing very well. How can we capitalize this in a better way? And then in regard to social participation, not only do we have to catalog what activities are out there, we need to celebrate the lives and experiences of older Portlanders and support neighborhood-based efforts. And I'd like to point out that the East Side Village director and founder, Hannah Adler, is here with us as well. She's been working on a program in the East Side, and this is a national effort. Villages in particular are ways to support people who are aging in their neighborhoods. This is something that we should expand and explore moving forward. In regard to communication and information, we're at a very interesting time with people who are not as technologically savvy and people who are increasingly technologically savvy. How do we bridge the divide, and how do we understand to best meet the needs of people with a wide range of abilities? And then in regard to community services, not only is preparing for a disaster or some kind of an emergency critical, we also need to understand how we can improve the age friendliness of our neighborhood centers, corridors, main streets. These are all critical growth kind of components of not only our city but our region. And then the final piece, this health services piece, I really want to highlight this last point, which is to integrate active aging into a larger campaign, an educational campaign, to further our understanding of age-friendly, or what is an age-friendly community. We would like to start something that was really widespread to say, you know, aging is about everyone from the time you're born till the time you pass away. What are aspects of healthy and active aging? So with that, we do want to kind of leave this question of what comes next. Turn it back.
Okay. So our plans for moving forward after the action plan is presented to City Council, presumably in October on the 16th, hold meetings with the organizations who have identified as the potential partners. If you remember, if you had a chance to take a look at the action plan, it's structured by action items, and then underneath each one is a list of potential partners. Those potential partners have not yet, in all cases, been approached about this work. So obviously we need to hold meetings with them, explain the items, confirm willingness to collaborate, refine items if necessary, identify other people who should be involved in organizations, identify an accountable organization, and set timelines, as well as priorities. We need to identify measurable and meaningful indicators for monitoring our progress over time. And we're thinking that what we should do after this action plan is we should prepare an implementation guide that would basically contain all of those elements that would emanate from the meetings that we've held with the potential partner organizations. In terms of how we can ensure success, we really think that this What is Age-Friendly educational campaign is a key component. Obviously, our council needs to keep abreast of technological and policy and other developments. We've developed a website for sharing information about the project, and we need to finalize that website, which should happen very shortly, early this fall. And then money is going to be needed. We need to seek funding for coordination of the effort, for research and demonstration projects. Those kinds of projects could include partnerships with other cities and international cities as well. Research to examine what are the outcomes that we achieve when we go about trying to implement these age-friendly features. How do we need to vary the approach depending on which area of the city we're working in? And then some additional or some specific age-friendly infrastructure and programs and actions need to be developed. So we raced through that so that we'd have time to talk with you and get your reactions.
Questions?
I have a comment on one of the last things you said. You know, not that I wasn't listening to everything up until then, but you said figure out what parts of the city we should make age-friendly. right?
How we might differ our approaches depending on which parts of the city. So there are certain areas of the city, for example, where there aren't sidewalks.
Okay.
And some of those areas are in the Southwest Hills and others are over in East Portland.
Right.
So the approaches that we need to implement by neighborhood might well differ. And the preference of the older adults and the younger adults in those neighborhoods might differ. So I think while it's important to have some guide about the general kinds of action steps we need to take, we should be sensitive to neighborhood differences.
Good, we're on the same wavelength then. Because I thought for a moment that you were trying to figure out part of the city to put old people in.
Well, we've already done that to some
Yeah.
extent, but,
Yeah.
you know.
But, whereas I would contend that it should be woven into the entire city. And I think that's what you're implying with your comments.
It absolutely
Good.
is.
All right.
Yes.
All right, I'm done.
Karen?
So something that Dawn just said just kind of sparked me. Culturally responsive and culturally specific differences about aging are also a huge consideration when you talk about equity. So what kinds of things have you thought about in your action planning that are different across Asian aging populations and Native American and African American and white, Russian? What kinds of thoughts do you have with that?
Deborah wants it.
Well, I have a response.
Go, Deborah.
One of the interesting conversations we've had through the comprehensive plan update was looking at residential development and compatibility, and the idea that for many cultures, living in an intergenerational home with multiple generations of the same family, in many cases, that might mean having a couple of kitchens or having more of a compound as opposed to just a single-family house that we're very familiar with in our culture and in some of our cultures. And so having some more flexibility potentially in what kinds of housing you could build. There's some limits now in what fits in a single-family home. Would we want to go in a direction of having some more flexibility, of having more of a compound? That's a question, and I don't know that we'll get through that immediately, but I think it's an interesting question that very much connects with cultural expectations of multiple generations living together. So that's one example, and we've started to touch that one.
I'm really glad you're thinking about that because I've been around a lot of kind of intergenerational homes in Islamic countries. They're fantastic. I went to visit some friends in Abu Dhabi. They live in a house with 24 people. It's so cool. And there are 3 generations that live in the house. What? And this is not a small house, mind you. There's plenty of room for 24. But big communal kitchen, central atria, just fantastic situation. It's great for the older generations, and it's great for the kids. It's wonderful for the kids. They're always around family. It's a very nurturing environment. And it'd be great to emulate some of that. There are a lot of countries out there that don't have retirement housing.
Lots and lots.
They haven't ever invented that. It's in the home. Yeah.
Kat?
No,
Chris?
Kat was first.
Kat?
You beat me to it.
I think we
Okay.
tied.
Cool.
First of all, I want to thank you for your commitment. I was really disappointed to hear you're one of 5 remaining of the 33 original. That's I want to back your fortitude. I think that's great. You commented on it being your report here, your action plan being age friendly for all ages. Yet it does seem very focused to older generations versus, let's maybe say, the really young or even the middle. I don't know. So it's just interesting. I'd love to know your comments on that. Do you plan on expanding it? Are there things that we should focus on for other age groups that makes it more broadly age friendly? Or is it purposely just no, we really need to focus on an older population?
Yeah, I'll do my best to address this question. As gerontologists, we've been grappling a bit with when do we plan for other ages and not just older adults. But I think we've become increasingly aware that this is a project about all ages and all abilities. And I'm also a commissioner on the Portland Commission on Disabilities. And I understand that the work that's going on, we've talked about this a lot, is good for mothers in strollers. It's good for people in wheelchairs or with walkers. little things that we might not have thought about in the past, like we've got this wonderful Pioneer Courthouse Square with bricks that are inaccessible that make it problematic for people who are younger and older. Those types of details are things that we haven't paid attention to in the past that really are good for all ages. And I think that what we've found in the last year in particular with our work is that this intergenerational piece and this interdependence piece, those are critical for our success. And we've brought new partners into the fold that have really highlighted that. And they've said we need mentoring opportunities. We need to look at schools as community centers and the way that we're shifting our thinking about public facilities. And there are a number of other examples that we could point to say, really, this isn't just about somebody who's over a chronological age of 45 or 55 or 65, but really about a population that we've kind of maybe pushed to the side or figured that our general planning, sustainable development will take care of them, but the devil's in the details, and it's time that we need to make a concerted effort as a city to really start dealing with the minutia of planning for an age-friendly environment.
I like what you said, and I don't disagree that we probably, as a designer and architect, that we don't need to maybe think more about the older population, and I think it's great that there's an emphasis on that, don't get me wrong, but I think, and you already hit on it, so many of the points that you were making in this action plan that I was reading, you could just put a picture of a kid in it too, and it would totally hold true. And so it could be just a little semantic thing like that all of a sudden makes it just encompass very clearly all ages. I mean, I think you're there. I think it's just, and I think it's also perhaps explaining there's a reason why there's an emphasis on an older age group, maybe compared to some of the others.
That makes sense. Thank you.
So I guess I'm thinking about intergenerational advocacy. Sidewalks are an issue in a lot of our neighborhoods and are a challenge in activating neighborhood centers in parts of Portland. And I was thinking back to this budget season where there was a suggestion to move some sidewalk money to do some paving instead. And Representative Shemaiah Fagan was very, very effective in organizing in East Portland to get that turned around. But that was all about school-age kids was the thrust of that advocacy. And I sort of think if we had the Safe Routes to School Coalition working in partnership with Elders in Action and AARP, my God, we might get a sidewalk on every street in Portland. So what will it take to bring those advocacy communities together and make those connections?
I think what it takes is education and introductions so that people understand that they have common interests. And Alan alluded to to the fact that we're now focusing increasingly on this idea of intergenerational interdependence. And the reason for that is another project that we were doing at the Institute on Aging involved bringing together thought leaders from around the state to focus on how do we think about aging in our state. And one of the key things, one of the key elements that emerged was the importance of intergenerational interdependence. So that people understand that aging is across a lifespan, and that what affects one generation affects the other. So I think it's largely educational and making the introductions, bringing the groups together. I mean, you mentioned the Safe Routes to Schools. I believe there was a Safe Routes to Senior Centers project as well. Yeah.
Maybe the senior centers need to be next to the schools.
That would be, the senior centers could be in the schools if the schools were built properly.
Other questions? I want to thank you. I think this is fantastic. I would just make the comment of connectivity. I think a lot of people have talked about that. It seems that in the last two sessions, we've had kind of the healthy housing. We've had gentrification. We've talked about housing and what their priorities are. And now we're talking about aging. It seems to me that they're all connected. And the ability for all of that group all the groups, separate groups to kind of get in the same room. And I agree, lay out all the priorities, they all start to kind of look about the same. I mean, you phrased them differently, but a lot of them are the same, in my perspective at least, or many of them. So to be able to kind of come together, as Chris said, and advocate for many of the same things would be a strong advocacy at council. But also, as we asked the other group, for you to come forward is going to be great and say, these are things we would think about in, code or something like that we would want to see. But it's going to be better, I think, and should have thought of this for the other people too, if everybody gets together and says, this is not only supported by our little housing group, but it's all of these things that hit multiple objectives at the same time. And so that it's a stronger base for us to kind of advocate from. And the last thing I would look at is the idea of transportation standards in terms of gentrification seem to be and I don't know if it's an issue that you talked about in the report specifically, but it seemed to indicate that transportation had a significant impact on your population around and about kind of where they lived, where people lived. And so I didn't see TriMet on your list, but it seems that TriMet needs to be a partner down the road. Economically, I didn't see PDC, but I think PDC is the economic guru guys. And I mean, I know they're tweeting out about a bunch of other things, but maybe this might be an option to tweet about for economic development of aging population. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any suggestions for modifications to the report before we go to City Council?
I don't have specifics. I just think tying, it's a great report in of itself, but tying it to this greater healthy, connected neighborhood, as Deborah started to talk about, and that when you speak about an aging population, you're speaking really about how to serve a lot of the populations in Portland, whether it's youth, whether it's people in healthy neighborhoods, or it's how how a neighborhood's developed, the transportation within a neighborhood, the need to go to a job and the need to get to health services seem to me to be two critical ones. And that transportation need of a sidewalk, of a good bus route, all seem to be connected. So people are trying to get to a job, need to get to a hospital or health services, or to have services close. Those are all connected to a city, and kind of connecting those with what all the other priorities that council has in front of them seems to be a good option. I don't know that I can't think of anything specific, but connecting it with the housing that they're doing and they're very interested in, because it is. The age of population kind of is a gentrification issue. I mean, from at least reading, and as I read between the lines, if the transportation and the affordability of the housing and the services, people start to move to those areas where it's affordable, there's services available, and transportation available. And if that's not,
Or worse, they become isolated in their homes.
They become isolated, yeah. So. And so we know both of those, that population is low-income population, also minority immigrant population, as you heard in the earlier so if you tie those two together, you start thinking about a big population of Portland and many of the concerns they hear already.
Andre,
Yes.
my one suggestion for working with council is to try and be specific. They want to do something. They get a report, every time, 2 or 3 at every council meeting. They want to take action on things sometimes. And if there's a way to identify, even just a very, after you're done with the report, to say, and if I could do just one thing, it would be, whether it's sidewalks in East Portland or, whatever the item is. And then to have around that one topic sort of the unexpected partners, because I think that there's nothing more influential at council than when, it's sort of why we created the new commission that you all are on the way we did, to have an educator and a health professional and a developer, you know, all saying the same thing, sometimes for totally different reasons, but you want the same action to happen. And so I think being able to, at a minimum, to have some letters of support, but even if you could bring a couple other people to the council meeting when you're doing this, some of the folks that were just here before you, or an environmental group saying, you know, this is why we care about these exact same things. It gives them another reason to be able to pursue it. And it's a good timing in terms of, it seems like we're always getting ready for a budget, but you know, if there's something that's very specific that, you know, they always want to be able to do something like that. So.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned. Yeah.